What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. My guest this evening is Gordon Hasse. Gordon is a very famous woodrail pinball collector, especially well known in the Gottlieb circles. And he has made an incredibly generous donation to the Pacific Pinball Museum of a massive number of Gottlieb and some Williams and other manufacturers' pinball machines. I wanted to speak with Gordon tonight and discuss some of his memories playing the woodrail games on location, as well as talk a bit about his feelings towards payout pinball and his upcoming book that he's publishing on 1954 Gottlieb pinball machines. So without further ado, I'm very much excited to present to you Mr. Gordon Hasse.
Hello.
Hi, Gordo.
Yeah, is this Nick?
It's Nick.
How
How are
doing,
you?
my friend? I'm doing well, thank you.
So first, I just wanted to ask, what were some of your earliest memories playing pinball?
Well, I think a couple of things that come to mind. During the summers of 1953 and 1955, our family took family trips to Miami Beach, at which time I was 8 and 10 respectively, and there was a huge arcade. I'm sure there were more than one, but this particular arcade was immense, and I just vaguely remember playing some of the Fairy Tale series games, and Barnacle Bill in particular. My next play experience was back home in Philadelphia, in the little community of Fox Chase. There was kind of a greasy spoon about a block away that usually had two machines installed at any point in time, and I remember distinctly playing Williams 20 Grand, one of the early 50s Williams pitch and bats. So those were the earliest recollections that I had. I did a lot of playing in the mid-50s down on Long Beach Island, in or around the town of Beach Haven, and there was a place called the Beacon Arcade in Beach Haven, and they had some wonderful games there. That's where I first became acquainted with the Queen of Hearts, with Joker, with United's early ABC Bingo, Hawaiian Beauty. There was also a little snack bar or snack shop close to the house we rented, and since Beach Haven was kind of backwater in those days, the operators tended to get games that were, kind of older games that they would probably buy from big city operators. So I remember playing a lot of fairly early 50 stuff there, like Flying High, Coronation, Crossroads, what else? Lady Luck, and a few others. So I got to play a lot of games that really were kind of before my time. I didn't really become an active player of current games until about 56. There I remember playing Wishing Well and Rocket Ship and any number of the games of that era. But growing up in Philadelphia was pretty much an open city in terms of pinball, and the games were pretty much ubiquitous in Philly. There were a lot of corner stores in those days, mom and pops, and that's the place where most of the games were, and you didn't have to look far to find one, unlike today where those kinds of venues just simply don't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But, they were in barber shops, they were in coffee shops, diners, even ran into one in a shoe repair place at one point. Believe it or not. anyway, that's kind of my early history with the games. When I was about, I guess, 11 or 12, my folks, who kind of took a dim view of pinball as being somewhat seedy and lowbrow, they didn't really encourage my play. So I think they thought, well, maybe if we buy him a used one, that'll sate his appetite. So over the next couple of years, I acquired the first games that I ever owned. The very first one was a Williams Army-Navy, followed by a Gottlieb Happy Days, followed by a Williams Pitch and Bat Star Series, and then I acquired on my own. I remember bringing it home over the tracks of the trolley that ran into our community at the time in a little red wagon. A friend of mine owned a Gottlieb 1950 Just 21 with a turret shooter, and brought that home. Never could get that one working. And later games that I acquired before I started absolutely serious collecting, I came across a Gottlieb Green Pastures, a 1954 game that was under a tarpaulin on the balcony of a motel in Wildwood, New Jersey, and I purchased that, put it in my fraternity house in the basement, and eventually somebody ripped it off. But then I kind of went underground with pinball until I got out of graduate school and was working in New York City, and that's when I started my serious collecting. First game I ever owned as an adult, I no longer had any of those I owned as a youngster. I think my parents gave them away. But I bought from a very early coin-op dealer, a guy named Ira Warren, who had a pinball restoration company on J Street in Brooklyn. I bought a Dragonette from him, and shortly after that, I bought a couple of games from Steve Young, which is how I met Steve. I bought an Ace High and a Harbor Lights, and that was kind of the beginning. In terms of how I learned to repair and restore them, I had tinkered with them as a kid and knew just enough to be dangerous. So at some point I decided, I really want to collect these things. The Dragonette had got me excited and proved to me that even in the early 70s, these 50s games were still available. So I went out to Nakoma Park, which is right outside of Oklahoma City, and I took a 1-week course on flipper repair and maintenance from an old operator named Cal. What the heck was Cal's last name? Cal Clifford. Cal Clifford was the owner and sole instructor at Cal's Coin College.
Huh.
And that was kind of fun. We spent a whole week. It was just he and I together. He had a week between his regularly scheduled classes, which were usually, run for operators, street mechanics, and guys who work for the distributors. But he made an exception in my case, and I was his sole pupil. And we spent that whole time working on Gottlieb woodrails. So that's how I learned how to fix them.
That's pretty excellent. So, of course, those things, were still in existence at that time.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is good. Yeah. Nowadays, it's, with the proliferation of internet-based knowledge, that's very helpful. But at the time, I bet that was a great boon to your collecting, too.
Yeah, you really had to scramble to find any information in those days.
Right.
I had several Gottlieb catalogs and a little bit of information that I could glean from other sources, but it was pretty tough finding your own way if you didn't have some experience with them. You had asked about some of my favorite games from the major woodrail manufacturers, and in Gottlieb's case, it's like, which of your children do you like best? Because I have so darn many favorites, but I guess right at the top of the list certainly would have to be Queen of Hearts. It's probably my overall favorite game, regardless of era. I think Mystic Marvel, another card-themed game from February of '54, is a terrific game. I love Dragonette. I find Diamond Lil, despite the fact that it has the reverse flippers, to be a terrific game to play, and I also have great admiration for Slug and Champ of 1955. I like virtually all of the single gobble hole multiple special games where you could win at up to 10 or 12 games at a time if you hit that extra special hole, and that would be games like Classy Bowler and World Champ, Frontiersman, Harbor Lights. I love those games. I think Ace High is a terrific game as well. In the Williams corner, I would have to say that probably Race the Clock, which is not a well-known game. It was Williams' first multiplayer, and a 4-player at that. But I only ever got to play that in one venue. I suspect that the production run on that was very small because A, it was their first multiplayer. B, it was the first game they released that was set to run on a dime. So that was a big step for everybody in the distribution chain from distributor to operator to player. I have never been able to find the actual production run on it, but as I said, I suspect it's very, very small. I advertised to purchase one for, I don't know how many years, maybe as much as a decade, and never got a single bite. But I like that game. I like Army-Navy very much. I think Shoot the Moon is a fun game. It's kind of primitive. It's early. It's November of '51. But I also have a fondness for Skyway, which is not a whole lot of fun to play, honestly. But I love the graphics, and I love the attempted innovation that Williams was always up to. I probably said this before, but Williams was truly the innovator in the era of the 50s. Gottlieb moved progressively in increments, but you could always identify a Gottlieb game. When they changed slowly, whereas Williams, every game was a totally different experience. But they tried some interesting things, and certainly Skyway was one of those experiments that I thought was daring and pretty interesting. Going back to Gottlieb for just a moment, I happen to favor, as a group, Gottlieb's games of 1954, particularly those that were the double coin games. And the book that I'm working on and about to finish concerns itself primarily with the Gottlieb games of 1954 and the double coin, double award games in particular. As far as United, even though it's not a flipper game, I guess my favorite is their Manhattan novelty, not the bingo, but their novelty game, which was their last non-flipper game. I think my love for it has mostly to do with the artwork. I think it's spectacular. And among George Millenton's best work, in the case of Chicago Coin, my favorite would have to be Thing, a nice satirical take on an already satirical record of the time. And I'm thinking about, I have to stop and think for a minute about Keeney. I couldn't give you one. They made so few true amusement pinballs that I certainly don't have a preference, nor do I have much playing experience. Genko, I think some of the things that I like from Genko were toward the end of their runs, where they were doing some pretty daring things like Summertime, where they had a play field in the back box as well as on the play field. There was another game they made, I think it was called, was it Double Award or Double something? Same type of a setup. Their one turret shooter game, Canasta, is kind of an interesting piece. I like it because it's a card theme, and it's also kind of an aberrancy. They didn't make any other turret shooters. And let's see, winding up, Exhibit. I guess I would have to say some of their later work, like their last game was Trigger, or one of the games in that era. What I like most about the Exhibit games, and I didn't get to play many of those, certainly not on location, I think they did a great job in terms of their cabinet graphics. They always had complementary cabinet graphics as opposed to Gottlieb, who always did strictly geometrics. They were often pretty, but Williams did a lot of really pretty cabinets. The cabinets on Four Corners, for instance, is terrific, and the cabinet on Hong Kong is a killer, and nice stuff, really nice stuff.
Yeah, I've done an episode on Four Corners. I think that is a really interesting game, both from the kind of semi-bingo aspect, and also the artwork, as you mentioned, is just fantastic all the way through. The whole package is great on that one.
Yeah, it is a good game. I probably should have mentioned that because it is on my list of favorites. I think because of my love of the Gottlieb games of the 50s, that I didn't play too many of those Williams combination, quasi bingo games. Although they were neat games, but they were hard to beat consistently, and I enjoy playing for scoring points more, and the Gottlieb games afforded you that opportunity. But they did make some really good games in that genre.
Well, before we continue on, can I ask you what the gameplay of Thing is like? I've never seen one, and I have a friend who's been looking for one for a long time, but I've always been curious what it plays like.
Well, the distinguishing feature on that is kind of a hidden feature. There's a box in wrapping paper and ribbon, at least graphic representation of same, and that's supposed to represent the thing. And when you get in there, what it is, it's actually a kick hole, which awards varying amounts of score depending upon what you've done otherwise. It's also got a number sequence feature. It's got it's kind of the opposite of Gottlieb's ball trap, which Gottlieb used on 5 or 6 of their games. Mermaid being one of them. it's that kind of a feature, but its configuration is quite different. But up to a certain point in time, you can't lose the ball at the bottom of that game while this blocking gate is up. And then once you score a certain number of once you register a certain amount of score, then it drops. And in that regard, it's like, as I said, it's like Mermaid and a couple of the other Gottlieb games. But it's an interesting piece. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy that did that parody song. Oh my, having a senior moment. In any event, it's a fun game. It's doesn't play as well as the Williams or Gottlieb stuff from the time, but I think the theme and the cabinet graphics, and in fact the backglass graphics are a ton of fun. And it's different. It's a different experience than playing a Gottlieb or a Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Worth owning and not that easy to find anymore.
Yeah. My friend's been looking for quite some time. So, now you also mentioned Skyway, I believe, Williams.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Was that one of their single flipper games?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yep.
Those are very interesting. I've never played one or even seen one. I've just seen them on IPDB. But are they interesting players? Like Skyway, I'm trying to recall, but I think there's a chute on the left-hand side. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are a lot of channels on the left-hand side. There are a lot of holes on the right-hand side. It has the one flipper. It's got an elevated rail kind of a system. It's real tricky, but it is not great for conducive, not really conducive for great play. Probably the best single flipper Williams game would have to be Big Ben from, I don't know, 53, 54, I'm not exactly sure, but that one works really well, and the position of the flipper on that game, plus the fact that your kickers in that era of the Williams stuff were 50 volts rather than the weaker Gottlieb, it really plays nice. It's a lot of fun.
Very interesting. I know that your collection was comprised of many, many wonderful Gottlieb games, including all in the Fairy Tale series. Do you have a favorite in some of those early flipper games? Not necessarily from Gottlieb, if you don't prefer the play of those, but
well, that whole flipper series, or that whole Fairy Tale series, where, as you probably know, just from observing them on the Internet Pinball database, were kind of painfully similar in terms of design, and they were also I think reveal their pre-flipper origin, because until we got to Barnacle Bill, there wasn't, I don't think, a conscious realization of the potential of the flipper as a targeting device. Those 6 flippers on the Fairy Tale games, they're just kind of there to keep the ball moving around. It's very hard to target for anything off of those flippers because of the position, and also the fact that they were linked together and powered by a single solenoid, which meant that they were not particularly
high
potent.
Power. Right.
But I think if I had to choose one, I'd probably choose it on the basis of the graphics, and my favorite graphics are on Old King Cole, particularly the playfield. Really, really terrific-looking graphics. Because, it's hard to discern major points of difference between them in terms of their play. Lady Robin Hood is nice, too. I like the graphics there, and I like the bullseye targets. That's fun to play. But I guess I'm more more enamored of some of the graphics than I am of the play value. But of course, you got to look at it in the context of when they were made. At the time, it's great stuff.
Yeah, I've played Humpty Dumpty and Jack and Jill, and I vastly prefer Jack and Jill to Humpty Dumpty as far as gameplay goes. Yeah. Just the flasher effect under the playfield. Yep. I think that's incredibly cool for the time, especially.
I love the graphic of Jack with his broken crown.
Getting the vinegar put on. So, switching to tech for a moment, which manufacturers' games do you prefer to work on the most, just as far as mechanisms and so forth? I know there's a lot of similarity.
I prefer the Gottlieb. I think they were better designed. I think they were built to be more durable. There's a huge commonality of parts that they've used over a long period of time, so a lot of stuff is interchangeable, more so than some of the other manufacturers who did a lot of one-off stuff. I don't have any working knowledge of the electronic games. I don't, for the most part, care for them, and I've never felt the need to own one or to learn how to maintain or repair them. My whatever expertise I have resides entirely in the EM stuff.
Well, yeah, I guess I should have couched that in EMs and parentheticals.
No, that's okay. No big deal. I just am not. I'm stuck in the EM era.
Well, you know, I love working on EM machines, and I agree about Gottlieb's durability. Once you have them working, it's pretty hard to make them stop.
Absolutely. The worst thing you can do is not play them.
Yeah.
Once you get them set up properly and you got all your contacts, properly cleaned and gapped, and there's very little that can go wrong. I've never had one of their transformers fail. I've never had one of their motors fail. And some of those damn things, have been brought back from the dead. They're just, rusty and crusty, and once you give them a proper cleaning and play the thing on a frequent basis. The other thing is, looking forward, 10 years, 20 years out, whatever, you'll still be able to repair those Gottlieb games. I mean, worst case scenario would be you had to wind some coils on your own. But the stuff they're making today, I don't think that's going to be the case.
I'm right there with you. I mean, there's already a scarcity of parts, especially for some of the early solid state stuff. So that's going to get worse as time goes on.
No question.
And there are going to be clever people that keep those machines going, but as far as original parts, we're already starting to see those dry up. So
yeah, it's going to be like cars in Cuba.
So, what is your favorite feature from the woodrail era specifically? What did you like to see in a game when you stepped up to it?
Well, there were two things that I favored most, and one of them I've already mentioned, which was those games that were constructed such that there was a single central gobble hole, and you could build up its value as high as 10, and in one case as high as 12 games for a special. Both Wishing Well and Frontiersman, you could win up to 10 games on the extra special with one ball. In other words, dropping one ball in the hole. You could win 20 if you build it up properly and had two balls left and dropped them both in the hole. Derby Day would award up to 12 games. There's nothing like that in modern pinball. You play for points, period, paragraph. The other thing that I liked very much and was sorry to see disappear was until the introduction of real scoring, REEL, on Gottlieb single players, most of their games in the 50s and even earlier, you could play for either points or score. And that made for a very interesting situation, because you had two major ways to win on most of those games. And most of the 50s games, particularly the mid-50s games from Gottlieb, you had at least two, and in some cases, three additional ways you could win. So you'd have score, points, sometimes you'd have a special based on completing a number rotation, Dragonet and four bells, 4 ways of winning, Queen of Hearts, 5 ways of winning, Stagecoach, 5 ways to win. I mean, they were great. They were wonderful games, and the brilliance of them, in my judgment, was that you weren't so much pitted against the game as you were pitted against yourself, because you were constantly having to make choices and adjustments as the game played to determine, what your best shot of winning was, especially when you had a situation where you could win on 5 different features. So that's what I miss most about the modern stuff. That and the fact that they're filled with what I can only characterize as toys. They're derivative rather than original. They're all based on a movie or a TV show or a personality, leaving you little room for your imagination. They have playfield surfaces that are so dense with graphics that sometimes I can't even follow the ball. So, call me old, call me crotchety, call me old-fashioned, but I know what I like.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, it's interesting that you talk about winning multiple replays and having to adjust your strategy as you play. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this podcast also talks about the bingo games. And I wondered, what were some of your thoughts on payout pinball in particular, and payout pinball in general, and bingos in particular?
Well, I've owned a couple of bingos. I've played them on location and enjoyed them and enjoyed the gambling factor. I recognize the problems that gambling pinball, payout pinball, has posed in the past. I know of situations from my childhood where I would hear tales from adults about, working guys who would, on a Friday night, go into their favorite bar and put their whole paycheck into a Valley One ball, and then have no money for food or rent. They were very addictive and very cleverly designed, and it was easy to just become a degenerate gambler with those things. I think the one balls were the most pernicious of all, because the time of play was absolutely minuscule. The bingos, very interesting, and the designers were absolute geniuses, especially as the evolution of those games continued. The features were just extraordinary, and I don't know if you spent any time inside a bingo head. Well, then It's just extraordinary that you could do those things electromechanically. Fascinating games, fun to play. I think that in venues where gambling is allowed, they should continue to run them, but I don't think they have much appeal when they're in situations where they're competing with, blackjack, poker, roulette, chemin de fer, all those casino games. But I think, where they can be operated legally, fine, terrific. I think there's still a lot of them in Hawaii. I suspect a lot of them are still operated in Tennessee and South Carolina, which was among the last places that they were still legal. I'm not sure that they are anymore. But I think they were terrific. It's hard for collectors to find some of the early payout games. They're highly desirable among a segment of the collector market, and they're fascinating to play. And the fact that they had automatic payout games, as early as somewhere in the mid-30s is pretty cool.
Yeah, especially I like the ones that hid it in a secret drawer. I think that's pretty clever.
The not very secret drawer, right?
Well, yeah.
But the dodges were incredible. Paying out in tokens or paying out in tickets. Well, yeah, which you could then redeem for cash. But I played some bingos in Raytown, Missouri, as late as, which is right outside of Kansas City, as late as like 1966, and those were equipped with payout. They were bally bingos equipped with payout chutes. So if you won, you got the coins right there. It was pretty cool.
Had to have a big satchel to carry them all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was never that lucky.
Ah, okay.
But if you won 600 replays, yes, that'd be great.
Yeah, so did you enjoy that feeling of winning on the bingos in the same way, or was it entirely different for you?
Well, the primary motivation for playing bingos is pecuniary. You're playing to hopefully win money. So it's a totally different smoke. But I never met anybody. Well, I did. I met one guy who claimed that he had literally made a living in the 50s as a young guy playing bingos, and I think that's not improbable. I mean, if you played the same game enough times and you figured out how to get that number 16 hole, which was always key, I could see that it's quite possible. But as with all pinball, it was really the casual player that made most of the money for operators. Operators, of course, love the bingos because, they returned many, many, many times what an amusement pinball would return. And they were so damn durable. I mean, there weren't any real playfield action components, so your playfield was good forever and ever. You can find those games, really old ones like Atlantic City and stuff like that from the early 50s, and the playfields are still great. Mm-hmm. But they also cost multiples of what an amusement pin did in those days. But and the other thing was a lot of the operators were operating them in territories where they weren't legal, but they were so profitable that they could afford to have them confiscated or pay fines and still come out on top.
Yeah, that kind of thing is incredible. I've gotten into them just in the past couple of years, and I'm a young guy. Of course, I never played them when they were legal to operate in my state, especially. And it's interesting to think about, for me. But when I play them, I certainly chase the replay. That's my motivation.
Yeah,
and it's pretty gratifying in a similar way for me. but having never had that experience.
I think the thing that I enjoyed most about them was if you hit a really, really, like that 5 in a line, and to hear that 3-reel counter chunk out those plays, just really a rush.
I agree. It's quite the thing. And turn the machine off and back on, it counts them all down.
Yep. Unbelievable. Those guys didn't miss many tricks. They really didn't.
No. It's not exactly a knockoff button. It's a switch, and it just happens to do that as part of the startup sequence.
Yep.
So let's move back into the wood rails.
Okay.
And let's talk about some of the really rare games that you've had pass through your hands. I wanted to know in particular about Williams Wonderland and Army Navy. I've never seen those in person, and I've always been curious about them. They have beautiful artwork.
Well, the Army Navy was the first game I owned, and I played the devil out of it. A lot of fun to play. In typical fashion at the time, you could play for score, but you could also play for points. And the points in this case were related to scoring in football. And there were 2 main pop bumpers on the playfield, and one of them would advance the football in one direction, and the other one would advance it in the other direction. And if you reached the goalpost in either direction, you'd score 6 points. And then there were also some rollover buttons on the playfield that were within the arc of the building or the incrementing of your movement toward the goals, and they would light at the appropriate time, and if you rolled over those, you get 3 points. So you could win on football points, or you could win on score. It also had a feature where you could spell out either Army or Navy or both by hitting appropriate bumpers on the playfield or rubbers on the playfield. And lighting either one of those would light 2 corresponding rollover lanes for special. Lighting both of them would light all 4 of the rollover lanes for special. The action components were 50 volts, so there was a lot of juice, a lot of fun. The kickers kick like crazy. The graphics are great. It was the earliest experiment by Williams in terms of using score reels in a single player. The last, I guess, 3 digits were dummies. They were just painted on wood. So only the numerals preceding it were actually moving. Nice cabinet graphics, football graphics on the cabinet. A real good game. I played the heck out of it, and one of them in my collection was, I shouldn't say one of them, I donated that among other games in my collection to the museum. I can't tell you too much about Wonderland, although I will tell you that the back glass is one of my very favorites. I did play the game as a kid. I don't remember. I know I never got mine restored to play, so I'm going to have to tell you quite honestly, I can't tell you much about it except that I love the artwork.
That's all I know too.
But it seems to be very desirable. Collectors are always looking for it.
And it seems like it was much more rare than Alice in Wonderland. I don't know if that's true, but
probably so. I think the production run on Alice in Wonderland, which was the last of the fairy tale series, was only about 1,000 games, and I'd be surprised if if Wonderland was more than half of that.
Wow. That's those productions are pretty small, by 70s standards, which is where I'm more familiar, 60s and 70s. So that's pretty astounding to me.
Oh yeah, I mean that's why the darn woodrails are so hard to find. I mean the production runs, for instance, Gottlieb's Glamour, 300 units.
Whoa.
300.
Huh.
I mean, it's truly astonishing how it's astonishing in some cases that anything remains at all of those production runs. I'm trying to think of a couple of others there. Even a game like Daisy May, which was a beautiful game, I think it only made about 600 of those. Queen of Hearts, which was a huge success. I think the total run on that was somewhere in the order of 2,300, which was huge.
Mm-hmm.
The largest production run of any game for Gottlieb in the 50s was their 1957 Royal Flush, and that was 3,500.
Wow.
So,
wow.
I mean, it gives you a pretty good idea.
Yeah. That's incredible. I'm glad that there are so many restorable candidates that were out there for people to get.
Well, it's been my experience, and pretty much confirmed by other collectors and people who collect serial numbers, that it's very likely that of the complete run of all the woodrails from the 50s, that the survival rate here in the domestic market is probably on the order of 1 to 2%.
Wow.
And for any number of reasons, not the least of them being a lot of that stuff was immediately shipped out of the country. A lot of it was shipped out of the country after it came off location by distributors who service the offshore market. A lot of it was cannibalized by distributors to keep newer games working. A lot of it was confiscated by police and destroyed. And believe it or not, a lot of it was simply put out for the trash. And a big reason for that was, in that era, almost no operator would sell to a private party because they were afraid that they'd, put it out on their own and become a competitor. Right. So there was a place called Tri-County Amusements, which was right outside of Philadelphia, and I used to buy machines from them on an occasion, and they always had a junk pile of what were probably, in many cases, salvageable machines that were just out there as junk. So at this point in time, anyway, some 50 to 60 years later, most of the large finds of games from that era have been discovered. I think what remains is probably forgotten in basements and attics, and it's now become a onesies, twosies kind of game.
Yeah. So, I wanted to talk next about your thoughts on pinball and innovation and the effect that World War II had on both of those factors, and specifically the end of the war. But, if you have any particular thoughts about any of the manufacturers and what they were doing right after the war, I'd be interested to hear.
I don't know that I can speak too knowledgeably about that. I do think it's safe to say that a lot of new processes and materials came out of the wartime effort, and from the end of the world, from the end of the war on, the pinball manufacturers were kind of in the vanguard of innovation in terms of use of materials and various plastics and other components. They were kind of on the leading edge in the area of electromechanical stuff. I think a lot of that had to do with just the experience of having to conform to government contracts to make things that they never made before. Gottlieb made lifeboats and harnesses, and every one of the pinball manufacturers was doing war work, and I couldn't tell you what the other ones are doing, but I have some photos of some of the stuff that Gottlieb was making, and I suspect that the variety of experiences and materials that they had to become familiar with probably was a good and positive thing. Do you have a particular take on it?
Well, I guess my take is that because of the war efforts, there were improvements in the manufacturing, which is pretty apparent in the quality of the games that came out afterwards. And also because the kind of smaller manufacturers were absorbed or disintegrated because of the repurposing effort. So what's really interesting to me about that particular era is that coming out of the 30s, everybody had a pinball company, it seemed. And everybody was really experimenting quite a bit with features and ways to entice the player. Some people were doing the payout games at that time, and other people were adding ramps and kickers and all kinds of really fascinating stuff, which all but disappeared. And I just find that kind of interesting.
Well,
and I don't know if that's
go ahead. I'm
patents.
sorry.
I don't know if that's a patent thing. Maybe everybody waited for some patents to expire, or what exactly happened.
Well, I know that the shaking out, I suppose, was kind of inevitable, and I think that that probably, and I can't document that in truth, but it seems to me that the initial surge was in the early to mid 30s, because anybody that could buy wood and nails or pins or whatever decided that they could make these pin and ball games. And initially the demand was almost unlimited because it was depression, and anybody that could find a way to make a living did it, and some people did it by manufacturing these games. Some people did it by distributing and operating these games. And the guy in the street, for a penny, he could buy a few minutes of diversion from what was a pretty sorry economic and social situation. So, there was plenty of room for competitors and plenty of room to move in terms of innovation. But I think as time went on and the game started to evolve, the manufacturers learned a lot of different lessons. There's very little that's new in pinball. Most of the themes and the ways of winning and the game rules recur time and time again, and you see stuff that there were multiple player games in the 30s. They weren't like our multiple player games, but they had in some cases they had 10 balls of one color and 10 balls of another, and you were supposed to shoot them alternately. In some cases they had two play fields side by side with either a single coin shoot or two coin shoots. I think one of the things that happened, at least in my estimation, and one of the things that I find so interesting about the games of the 50s is that at that point in time, virtually all of the aspects of the modern game were in place. The flipper was in place, drop holes, kick holes, trap holes were in place, cyclonic kickers were in place, dead bumpers and pop bumpers were in place, and at some point in time, I think the manufacturers recognized that this was kind of the archetype, and what other ways were there for it to move? Okay, so you put in voices, you put in multi-level play fields, you put in magna saves, all variations on a theme. But I mean, the basics of the game, in my judgment anyway, had been established by the 50s, and the demand for this stuff had really fallen off tremendously, particularly for the makers of the amusement games. They were all of a sudden faced with absolutely fierce competition from shuffle bowlers. Shuffle bowlers in the 50s were big business. Not only did they sell well, but they were set up to take in a dime a game. Some of them were 4-player, some of them were 6-player. I think one of the manufacturers made a game called Team Bowler, where there were 12 players. It's literally 2 teams of 6 each. Jukeboxes were competing for collections. Bumper pool tables were competing for nickels and dimes. Became a very tough business. Nobody in the 50s were making long runs at pinball, and Williams and the other manufacturers, for the most part, their production runs were a fraction of what Gottlieb's were, and Gottlieb's weren't very long to begin with. So ironically, it was, in one sense, the golden age of pinball, because all the modern features were in place, and the great Roy Parker and George Melanton were doing the art, and the Harry Williams and Wayne Nyans and Harry Mabs were doing the design, and it was just a terrific age, and the stuff made at that time, in my judgment, is among the very best, despite all the things that have happened in the interim.
I agree. I mean, opening up one of those games is also a treat. Compared to even more modern EMs, or most especially a bingo. I mean, there's so many mechanisms, and some of them became more refined after that era. But as you say, the basics had been in place, and I find it pretty easy and comforting to work on a wood rail if the parts are available. So I enjoy those games quite a bit.
I do too. Not the least of the smell of them when you open them up.
Oh yeah,
It's intoxicating.
So, kind of carrying on in that earlier theme, and my apologies if you don't have many thoughts on this, feel free to say pass, but I just wondered what you thought of conversion games, in particular the ones that were produced during World War II to kind of keep the games going, but just in general, and what your thoughts might be as to why those kind of conversions don't exist today.
Well, there have been sporadic attempts, not attempts. There have been some conversion games made almost on a continuing basis, dating all the way back to the 30s, where you could buy a replacement board. There have been conversion games to a limited extent, as far as I know, in virtually every era. the stuff that was done during the war, of course, was out of necessity, and it was an attempt on the manufacturers to, first of all, have an income stream in addition to their government contracts, and at the same time, keep a foot in the door in terms of, manufacturing pinball games post-war, and it was an opportunity for a lot of entrepreneurs to come into the business and make these conversions, because the demand still existed, and in many cases, literally all they were doing was putting a new scorecard in there and maybe some new bumper caps. That was the least ambitious of the quote-unquote conversions. The most ambitious were the kinds of things that were being done by Nate Scheller, NASCO, out of Philadelphia, where he would new artwork on the back glass, new artwork on the play field. Generally speaking, quite a different play field configuration of the components, and they were virtually, different games, not just rehashes. But even Gottlieb sneaked a couple in there. They did a game called Cover Girl, not the one from the '60s, but one that was done during the course of the war. And of course, Harry Williams and Lynn Durant, who had been the driving force at Exhibit before the war, started United, and that's how they started out, strictly doing conversions. And smartly, they tried to buy up as many old United games as they could, because they'd been the designers of those, and that was the easiest way for them to get from A to B, is to rehab their old games. But it served the purpose. The distributors and the operators were hungry for stuff, and a lot of those late free war games you just can't find, because so many of them were turned into conversions. It's an interesting area, and if you take a look at say Rob Hawkins and Don Muting's guide on or listing of pinballs, and look at the number of conversions, it's astonishing. And in many cases, more than one title, sometimes even titles from more than one manufacturer, would be solicited by converters to be made into a single new title. So there might be 2 or 3 games that were original games with different titles, even from different manufacturers, that they would call in and refurbish to create a single new title, using the old ones as their inventory. But I think it was the entrepreneurial spirit at work, and I think it served the existing need pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating that they were able to take games from different manufacturers. I mean, it makes sense as far as getting a broader customer base, but it seems like that would be very, very difficult.
Yeah, I find it kind of interesting. Now, I'm not saying that was the common practice. The common practice was to draw one game or multiple titles from a single manufacturer, but in some cases they went beyond that. I suspect just out of necessity.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So, what are your thoughts, or do you have any particular favorites or standouts as far as flipperless games? I know your heart lies with the 50s Gottliebs, where flippers were firmly in place, but Do you like any of the older games and their style of gameplay in particular?
I didn't play too many of the pre-flipper games. Matter of fact, as a kid growing up, I didn't play any of them. But in later life, I've had an opportunity to play some of these games in the hands of other collectors. And some of them are quite wonderful, and in particular, and these are almost always mentioned, but the 3 Rockola totally mechanical games, Army, Navy, World Series, and World's Fair Jigsaw are wonderful games to play. They're marvels of purely mechanical genius, and you could amuse yourself today playing those games. I would venture to say some of the late pre-flipper games, by all the manufacturers, had become pretty interesting. Some of them used recovery shooters, where if the ball went into this enclosed area, it would be automatically fired back onto the play field. They also had kick holes in some cases that were aimed to hit a stretch rubber below them, which would then impel the ball back up the play field. Games like Gottlieb's Marjorie from right after the war, or I'm trying to think of another one that was really nice, Lucky Star. They were kind of fun to play, even though there were no flippers, because there were other ways that you could move the ball back up the play field. And a lot of them are very pretty games. If you look at the first 6 or 7 games that Gottlieb made after the war, starting with Stage Door Canteen through Flying Trapeze, they're all pretty nifty-looking games, and they do have a considerable amount of play value.
Yeah, I agree. I've always appreciated the artwork on the flipperless games, and I feel like it draws you to either the sequence or features that you're trying to complete pretty well, especially on the play field.
I agree.
Yeah. So from here, I wanted to talk a bit about your donation to the Pacific Pinball Museum. This was a very famous event. There's an article about you on Pinball News, and it was a considerable donation. And I was curious what inspired you to make the donation.
Well, there were a number of things involved. To be perfectly honest, Nick, I had originally intended to try and launch my own pinball museum with the intention of the games being restored and playable, just as they've done at the PPM. One of the reasons that I moved to Orlando, I had worked in New York for more than 30 years, and I'd worked in a very high-profile, high-stress business. I was an advertising creative director and copywriter, and I was tired of the pressure. I was tired of the congestion and the other things that go with living in New York, the high cost of living, etc. Anyway, I thought to myself, well, gee, where would you want to do this if you're going to have a museum? And of course, first thing that popped into my mind was, well, how about Orlando? That's #1 tourism destination in the country.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got down here, I quickly realized that the big three, that the Disney and the Universal and the SeaWorld, really had a terrific lock on the tourism market, and the secondary and tertiary attractions kind of struggled mightily. Plus the fact that I started to come to grips with the reality of what the barriers to entry were, and how long it was going to take, and how much capital I'd need, and I resignedly came to the conclusion that I simply couldn't pull it off. In the meantime, I had ongoing storage costs which exceeded $1,000 a month, and some of those costs had been going on for more than 2 decades. So I finally decided, look, I got to get out from under this. So knowing that I couldn't do it, I started approaching parties that I knew about or were friendly with, and started to talk about some kind of a cooperative situation. And I ended up going out to the second of the Pacific Pinball Museum's Pinball Expo, which they held every year in Marin County, and was very, very impressed with the show. I was very, very impressed with their board of directors, Michael Sheese and his wife Melissa Harmon, and Larry Zartarian, and the whole group of people that are board members were just great folks and very pinball engaged. And we started a conversation about how we might incorporate my collection into the PPM collection. And they very generously offered to pay for the move of these games, which was a monumental task. I mean, we had 2 of the largest Mayflower van line trucks, moving trucks that existed, and it was a full 2 days of loading, and then a 6-day journey, and plus we had another rental truck just to pick up the stuff that was in my local storage here. But I agreed with them that what we would do, that it would not be an outright gift during the course of my life, but it would be on loan until I passed. And the reason for that was that since the museum is a 501c3, a nonprofit, should for some reason the museum fail, the disposition of assets can only be to another 501c3. So the arrangement we made was to insure against my games disappearing if the museum should fail. So it's a permanent loan until my death, and at that time it becomes the property entire of the museum. But I was very happy to see it happen for any number of reasons. Number one, it fulfilled my long-term hope of keeping this rather complete, well, absolutely complete collection together. Number two, that it would not be sitting in expensive warehousing for the rest of my life, and that people could actually see it, touch it, play it. And it got me out from under a very big monthly nut. So it worked to everybody's advantage. The only disadvantage is that I don't have my machines at hand. They're 3,000 miles away. But I did keep a handful of duplicates. In every case, I donated the game that was in better condition of any of the duplicates that I had to the museum, and kept the poorer example because I wanted them to be as pristine as they could be for the museum. But in all, there were 240 woodrails. More than half of them represented a complete run of Gottlieb single-player woodrails from the end of the war, starting with Stage Door Canteen through the end of the woodrail era. It was made in I think the first month of '61. It'll come to me at some point. So it was all the single players, plus I had both versions of Duet, which was Gottlieb's first two-player, which was released in both a standard-size cabinet and the deluxe-size cabinet. And I also had a Super Jumbo, which was their first molded player, and a four-player. So it was a very nice, complete run of Gottlieb games, and a handful of games from other manufacturers, primarily Williams games. And little by little, they're being restored and rotated in and out of the museum. And right now, as you probably are aware, the museum is working toward moving out of their moldable storefronts into a 1904 former Carnegie Library, this magnificent, beautiful building directly across the street from Alameda City Hall. So, if you're comfortable with it, I'll put in a little pitch here. Anybody who is interested in either donating games or donating money or donating their time to the Pacific Pinball Museum in Alameda, they will be greeted with open arms.
And do you happen to have an address or something? You can send it to me in an email later.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. I'll be happy to.
Show notes. Yeah,
but we've had very encouraging responses, particularly in the area of game donors, but also in the financial area. A couple of good-sized corporations have made contributions, and we're doing a lot of grant writing. And little by little, the funds are becoming available to do the work that's required to get the museum or get the Carnegie building up to code and properly equipped to accept the collection.
Great.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, and if you ever get out there, you must visit. Ask for Michael Sheese or his wife, Melissa Harmon, or Jem Gruber, and tell them Gordo sent you.
I've got an in, huh?
There you go, man.
So, do your machines carry a placard that says from the Gordon Hasse collection?
Yeah, Michael has done that for all of the games. He's credited the donor and identifies the game on a little marquee above the machine. A lot of the stuff that's in there is Larry Zartarian's, who is, I think, the head of the board. He is the head of the PPM board. Major collector, lovely guy, and a lot of. He's a huge collector of both woodrails and Gottlieb woodrails in particular, but he also collects other woodrails and wedge heads. Got a magnificent collection.
Excellent. So, is there mostly older EM stuff there, or is it a good mix as far as the wood rails that they keep on hand and the wedge heads?
It is an excellent mix. What Michael has, well, I shouldn't say what Michael, but what Michael and his team have done, I think very smartly, is the room that you enter as you first go into the museum is wood rails and wedge heads, and then as you go into other rooms, equipment from other eras, right up to the stuff that's on location today is available for play. So it really covers all eras, and there are even some of the pioneering 30s games there that are cordoned off, and those specifically are for looking rather than playing. But we have wonderful mix. I don't think anybody who is into pinball, regardless of what they're looking for, would be disappointed. There's some bingos there. Everything is set on free play, and it's hard not to have a great time. There are accommodations for private parties. There are art exhibits by local artists. There's performance art several times a month. It's a rockin' place.
It sure sounds that way. Yeah, I was looking up information on United's Pixies, and I saw that they have one in the collection.
Indeed.
The artwork is incredible on that, as with most of the United games that they made in the bingo days.
George Melanton, thank you very much.
Yep.
Yeah, they have
quite the artist.
They have the bingo version of Manhattan from my collection there. I don't think it was set up there for a while. I don't know whether it's still set up, but that's another bingo, and they have 2 or 3 others that I'm aware of. So it's really a nice mix.
That's great. So, as I mentioned, yeah, if you can shoot me some info on where people can contact, that would be
sure.
fantastic.
I'd be more than happy to do that.
And then next, I just wanted to talk a bit about your upcoming book, if you're comfortable talking about it.
Absolutely. I welcome the opportunity to talk about it. It's something that I've been working on and off for a considerable amount of time, years in fact, much longer than I'd like to admit. But it's finally at the point where I'm proofreading it, I'm rechecking all my footnotes, and I'm about to engage somebody to publish it for me. Be happy to discuss it at any length. I can kind of give you a quick rundown. The purpose of the book is to present, I suspect for the first time, an overall review of the Gottlieb games of 1954, presented in a pop culture context. And by that I mean looking at the culture in which the games existed, looking at those aspects of the pop culture that were incorporated into the games, and also looking at how the games affected the cultural environment in which they existed. And it's got 20 chapters, 2 appendices, and it's going to run about 300 pages.
Wow.
The first chapter is a brief pinball history. I'm not going to go through all the individual sections, but there are about 20 or so sections in there covering everything from Bagatelle to the One Balls to the Johnson Act to bingos to Addaball, mechanical animation, bulb scoring out, real scoring in, on and on and on. Chapter 2, which is, I guess, the main section of kind of historical context. It's a discussion of the interesting things, many of which had some effect on pinball or were adopted in part by pinball. The interesting things that happened in the U.S., and that's called the Truly Great 48. And there's a lot of real interesting trivia that I think people outside the pinball hobby and people who are not necessarily pinball engaged will find interesting on its own. The third chapter I titled Pop Culture, Highbrow, Lowbrow, and No-Brow. And there I deal with several aspects of the popular culture. A section called The Soundtrack deals with the records of the time, the rise of rock and roll and R&B. And next section is called The Wheels, which talks about the automobiles of the period. There's a section on The Great White Way, which talks about the Broadway shows of the period. A section called The Big Screen, which talks about what was going on in the movies. One on the small screen, which talks about the rise of TV in that era. There's a thing on comic books. There's a thing on bubblegum and other collector cards, all trying to provide a context for the time in which these games were made. Chapter 4 deals with the coin-operated amusement machines of 1954, and that really talks about all the things that were competing with pinball at the time for the player's nickel or dime. Primarily the profusion of shuffle games. Chapter 5 talks about the parts and service that are currently available for pinball collectors, titled Chapter 5, Things That Will Enhance Your Enjoyment of a 1954 Gottlieb woodrail classic. And there's a section on reproduction backglasses, one on reproduction playfields, and one on reproduction paper items. Chapter 6 is about understanding the rules, and it's about playing a 1954 Gottlieb machine. Chapter 7 is 5 balls, 5 cents. That's simply an introduction to the individual chapters on the 13 games made during that year. And then the chapters that follow, chapters 8 through chapter 20, are individual in-depth studies of each of those games. And each one of those sections has a background, a section on theme and artwork, a section on how replays are won, a section on how to get the most fun out of that game, and a recommended play strategy. And the games covered are Green Pastures, Lady Luck, Mystic Marvel, Jockey Club, Hawaiian Beauty, Dragonette, Daisy May, Gold Star, Lady Luck, Four Bells, Super and Deluxe Jumbo, Diamond Wheel, and Stagecoach. In each case, there's a reproduction of the original factory photograph of the game and a reproduction of the original sales flyer for that game. And finally, in the two appendices, one is an overview of the entire coin-op industry in '54, and the second is called Voted Most Popular, and that talks about which of those games were most popular at the time and which of them are most highly valued today. So it's pretty comprehensive. It's probably going to run close to 300 pages.
Well, I'm ready to pick one up today.
I wish I had it printed and bound and could send it to you, but that's still a ways off.
Okay, so no date yet, right?
No, not yet. I'm still struggling with the title because I'm very confident that I can't sell enough of it to the collecting and otherwise pinball engaged community to make any money with it. So I've tried consciously to straddle the more general market. It's filled with wonderful trivia, and I think anybody that either grew up in that era or is interested in that particular area will find it to be a ton of fun. So I'm toying with a number of titles and positionings for it, but I've had a lot of fun writing it, and I have a feeling that people are going to have a lot of fun reading it. And what if you wouldn't mind my making a pitch, if any of your listeners want to be placed on a list to be notified when and how it's available, please have them send me an email at hasse.gordon gmail.com, and I will be happy to put them on the list and let them know when this thing is ready to roll.
Excellent. Well, be expecting an email from me as soon as we get off here. Yeah, that sounds
it's been
amazing.
Fun. It's been fun. As I said, I still have to complete my proofing, and I have to go back and recheck my my sources, because it carries a couple hundred of footnotes. I've tried to make it to some degree scholarly.
That's a massive amount of work, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's been a lot. It really has been. But I'm close enough to the finish line now that I can see that it's going to happen.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
What else can I help you with, if anything, Nick? Or what other questions might you have?
Well, if you have any just general thoughts on games, either in 54 or beyond or before, that are particular favorites for you, or that you enjoy playing, what's one that you come back to time and time again?
Queen of Hearts. It's really a wonderful game. There are 5 ways to win replays. The traditional score and points are 2 of them. Another one is by completing the 4 card suits at rollovers at the top of the game. Another is a number sequence, whereas if you put out numbers 1 through 6, which are either dead bumpers or stretch rubbers, there are two-way gates, one on either side of the playfield. They light for special, and every time you roll under them in either direction, they score a replay. And then there are the 5 gobble holes on the playfield, which represent the 10, Jack, Queen, King, and Ace. And if you put balls in those holes to form a poker hand, for instance, if you put 5 balls in any one of those holes, you win 8 games. You can also win games by putting 1 ball in each hole as a straight. You can have 4 of a kind, which I think awards 5 games, and I think it even pays on a full house, which would be 3 balls in one game and 2 in another. It's just a killer game. It's just nonstop fun, and gorgeous graphics. I love the little graphic of the king and the queen toward the bottom of the playfield where they're playing strip poker, which is pretty hot stuff for a game made in 1952. It's really a wonderful game. Frontiersman is another big favorite. That was obviously a takeoff on the Davy Crockett craze of 1955. They couldn't make a game called Davy Crockett, but they sure could make one called Frontiersman, using all the graphics and the coonskin hat and the whole thing, and ride the coattails of that enormous Disney success. That's one of those central drop hole, gobble hole games where you could win up to 10 games by advancing all 4 of the letters A, B, C, and D to the final position. Another wonderful game. Harbor Lights is a big favorite. Also a multiple special drop hole game. I'm trying to think of World Champ is another example of a great multiple special drop hole game. Sluggin' Champ, killer game, one of Wayne's best, I would say. It's a baseball theme that is not a pitch and bat. It's a traditional 5-ball game, multiple ways to win. Just so many great games in that Gottlieb area, particularly in the area of card games. I mean, Gottlieb was renowned as the quote-unquote king of cards, and it goes
Mm-hmm.
all the way back to Gin Rummy in 49, and Joker in 50, Queen of Hearts 52, Poker Face, which was almost a duplicate of Queen of Hearts, but different and great graphics. Mystic Marvel in 54. Ace High in 57, along with Royal Flush, also in 57. Terrific games, just terrific games. I sound like a broken record, I know, but I do like the Gottlieb card games.
They are excellent games, yeah. I haven't played all of those, but I've played a selection, and I've got to say I enjoy them too. How do you feel about the rehashes of Queen of Hearts as far as the playfield goes? You know, they did away with the gobble hole, but, you know, kind of brought the playability back again and again in the Wedgehead series. Do you like any of those games, or does the removal of the gobble hole change the whole game for you? And,
well, are you talking about the ones that have the progressive kick holes?
Yeah.
Move the ball across the playfield horizontally?
Sing-along, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I find those fun. Sing-along and I forget the names of some of the other ones. But, yeah, those are fun to play. Actually, the last... I'm trying to remember the name of the last card theme woodrail that Gottlieb made had that feature, and that was a lot of fun to play. I wish I could remember the name at the moment, but it's interesting because the Gottlieb, according to Wayne Nines anyway, Gottlieb moved away from the gobble holes because they met an extraordinary amount of resistance in the European market, particularly in France, which was a huge market at that time. The French just didn't like that. They hated the fact that, you know, these things would allow the ball to exit the playfield. They wanted a playfield where they could continue to play and not have that kind of what they considered to be an ambush. But I don't know. Things change, games evolve. I thought that their gobble hole games, for the most, were terrific. The trap hole games, although there were some great games, notably Coronation and Flying High, they were a little bit slow playing. And the interesting thing about, to me anyway, about the trap hole games, and Dragonette was another one, and I think they made probably 9 or 10 of them in the 50s. Interesting point, which I don't think anybody's spoken to, is that when you had a game with trap holes, unless you lost a ball or more than one ball at the bottom of the game in an out hole or a trough, the topography of the game changed on a continuing basis.
Mm-hmm.
So you were seldom playing the same game 2 balls in a row. And sometimes it worked very much to your advantage because the balls would be trapped in holes that would allow you easy access to a high-scoring target. In other cases, they fell in a way that, you know, encouraged you to lose additional balls or prevented you from pursuing high-scoring objectives. So, you know, it was a mixed bag. But in any event, unless you lost all your balls in an out hole at the bottom, which you couldn't do in a lot of those trap hole games because they had no out hole games like Chinatown and
yeah. I was going to ask you about Chinatown in particular, actually. I really enjoy that. I played that for the first time last year, and the gameplay of trying to reach 21 is pretty fascinating, especially for the time that it came out. You know, where the game is actually tabulating.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what you're doing. And it's not a bingo,
Yep.
so it's not like it's doing ongoing calculation. It's a sequence driven thing,
Yep.
but it's very fascinating because you've got essentially an upper playfield that's all trap holes, and you're trying to make that number 21. I thought the gameplay was just
35.
great. Or 35?
Or
Yeah,
low score, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 9, 12, 15. So it was either 15, 21, or 35. In other words, if you got all the low holes, it was a replay. If you got 21 through any combination, it was a replay. Or if you got the 5 highest scoring holes, it was a replay. That you would only know if there was if there was an instruction card on the game.
There was. I
You just didn't
probably
read it?
just didn't bother to read it.
Yeah, I mean that's what made it so interesting, because you could win more than one game on the holes, depending upon how you scored. I love that game. It's one of my very favorites. That was another one that I played years ago down in Beach Haven, which was old even when I played it then. The one that I had in the collection, which again was donated, came to me, and the cabinet had been repainted flat black, and I spent the better part of 2 days with 4/0 steel wool and solvent, bringing it back to its original graphics, which are beautiful, pinks and greens and yellows. It's a beautiful cabinet. But yeah, I love that game. And if you spelled out Chinatown, you had that rollover button at the bottom center that was a game every time you rolled over it. And if you got the the C and the A at the top, left and right rollovers, you'd like the center rollover for special. Great little game.
Lots of ways to win.
Great graphics too.
Do you have any particular feelings for games like San Francisco that rattle off 20 replays, but they're metal rails? Are you familiar with any of those?
I'm familiar with San Francisco in a vague way. I mean, I can picture the backlash. I don't think I've ever played the game.
It's it just kind of reminds me of some of the woodrails in the way that you can win those multiple specials and the sounds that it makes.
No, I'll have to look into that, because I was unaware of its features. I think it's probably pretty exceptional. I don't think there were too many later games where you could win that number of replays. What did you have to do in order to get them?
I don't recall if you had to spell San Francisco or what the sequence was, but it gives you either 20 or 25 replays. It's just some exorbitant number for the year that it came out.
That's great.
Yeah. And I wasn't aware of any other, kind of throwback replay earnings like that, but didn't know if you were either. Any other good favorite games? Any comfort food as far as the games go? Maybe from the metal rail era.
Honestly, I didn't get much into it. To be perfectly honest with you, I kind of became a pinball dropout at about the time that the woodrails came to an end. I was frankly very disappointed, because I thought they didn't know what they really had, and they were so intent on trying to quote unquote modernize the games that I think they never fully appreciated how good what they had already developed was. I probably sound like a Luddite or a goofball, but I don't think they've ever eclipsed the stuff that they made in the woodrail era in terms of combining great play excitement and and terrific accompanying graphics. I gave you saw the presentation that I gave at the PPM on the difference between original content and derivative content. And that to me has been a big disappointment. I don't like the replacement of photographic backglasses or silkscreen backglasses with photographic backglasses. I think that took something away from the game. It just occurred to me, harking back to your question about particular likes. I very much enjoyed the few games that Gottlieb made during the 50s that had a holdover feature, which among them would have been Frontiersman, Lovely Lucy, Royal Flush. I thought those were fun games, and I thought it was smart design, because if you were playing a game or saw a game sitting there where most of the things that had to be done to complete that holdover feature had been done, well, you were darn sure going to stand there and bump nickels into the machine and you would got that award with Frontiersman, for instance. It was worth 5 games. And, somebody had to do a lot of work to get it to the point where you just had to increment it one more time to get those 5 games. But, it was a nice crackerjack bonus. I think that another thing that was fun, although I am not a big fan of the Gottlieb multiplayers from the 50s, I did love the sensation of double matching, where you would be rewarded with 10 games, and this machine gun report of the stepping unit, racking them up. That was a real thrill. That to me was the most attractive feature of many of those Gottlieb multiplayers during the 50s. They are not as widely collected, and I think because the folks who had the opportunity to play both the single and the multiple players recognize the superiority of the former, but there are others who enjoy the multiplayers quite a bit, and Wayne Nines claims that it's what saved the factory and Gottlieb Pinball, so who's to argue?
Good point. So, Gordo, I wanted to thank you very much for your time and for coming on the show. And I hope that everyone will consider donating time, money, or even games to the Pacific Pinball Museum. I think their mission is very good, and as you can see, there are folks out there who are very interested in keeping these games alive for future generations. And I want to commend you on your efforts in this regard, Gordo, as well.
Well, thank you, Nick, and I appreciate your wanting me to chat with you this evening, and it's been a pleasure. And if there's anything in the future that you'd like to add, I'd certainly be more than happy to speak with you. And I thank you for indulging my sales pitches, and I look forward to hearing the broadcast.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you, my friend. Take care now.
You too.
Go on.
I wanted to again thank my guest, Gordon Hasse, for coming on and sharing his knowledge of these great games. Now, Gordon was kind enough the very next day to email me with information that we had discussed on the show. The first being San Francisco, the game that I mentioned that awarded some exorbitant number of replays. It's actually a maximum of 10. So, not quite correct. But that happens on a double match. This is one of the latest double match games that was ever produced, and it may be the latest double match. I'm not familiar with one later, and Gordon was not either. The latest he was familiar with was produced in 1954, so this was 10 years after that. So thank you for that information as well, Gordo. Now, he also sent along information on the Pacific Pinball Museum, which we discussed in the show, and I'll be putting in the show notes. It's located in Alameda, California, which is near to San Francisco. Their phone number is 510-205-6959. And they're open fairly late every day, except for Mondays, on which they're closed. The admission is $15 per adult and $7.50 for kids under 16. You pay once and you play all day. It looks like a really good deal, and the fact that they have these amazing machines, a whole run of Gottlieb's woodrail games, that's incredible in one place. I would highly recommend everybody go out, check them out, give them a call. Again, if you can, donate time, money, or even games. That would be fantastic. And that's all for tonight. Thank you again for joining me. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at nbaldridge, or you can listen to us on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.